It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. Today's show with Donald Trump, the new US President, and Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister. Is the special relationship on death row? Because many believe a trade deal with Trump is best for Britain, but will Labour's unbridled contempt for Trump and their love affair with Brussels torpedo the deal? And GB News has seen internal messages from BBC employees expressing disappointment at Donald Trump's resounding victory over Kamala Harris. We'll bring you some of these extraordinary taxpayer-funded workers' whingers. And the world is your oyster if you're an illegal immigrant, as the London Assembly has passed a motion in favour of free bus travel for all people seeking asylum, and that includes illegal immigrants. Labour claim it's to help with essential journeys. Is this fair, or is it yet another blatant abuse of taxpayers' money? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's the show, always an absolute delight to have your company. Later in the show, Nigel Farage will appear live from the Reform Party conference in the Valleys. And boy, oh boy, are we excited about his first appearance since that historic win with Donald Trump over in America. He was at Mar-a-Lago with the billionaires, with the movers, the shakers, the players. And what does that mean for Britain? We're about to see perhaps the biggest explosion in naked capitalism in living memory, all tied to drill, baby, drill. Surely that is the trading partner we should be aligning ourselves with, and not the sinking ship of Brussels. But will that happen? Will political differences with Donald Trump and the love affair with the European Union get in the way of what could be a brighter, bigger and more prosperous future for the United Kingdom? What do you think? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. A very good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Our top story: Dutch authorities have launched an independent investigation into an incident on the streets of Amsterdam, which saw Israeli football fans attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. Israel initially said it was planning to send military planes to Amsterdam to fly fans home, before later deciding to send 2 commercial planes instead. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made. The Dutch Prime Minister condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire. Israeli football fans say the police arrived on the scene too late.
They came really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hurt, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Sticking with football, some breaking news in the last hour. Tottenham Hotspur have been charged with misconduct by the Football Association in relation to homophobic chants by their supporters during a match against Manchester United earlier this season. The chants took place at a match at Old Trafford on the 29th of September and are understood to be aimed at Arsenal's head coach Mikel Arteta and United's midfielder Mason Mount. The club now face sanction from the national governing body over the matter and have been given until November 13th to respond to the charge. The government will look to persuade Donald Trump that harming the UK by hiking tariffs is not in his interest. That's coming from the Foreign Secretary amid fears of a looming trade war. David Lammy said he would seek to get across to the United States that hurting your closest allies is not in Mr. Trump's interest. Trump's pledge to raise tariffs on imports into the US could hit the UK economy. Mr. Trump has said he wants to increase tariffs on goods imported from around the world by 10%, rising to 60% on items from China. This all comes, as Mr. Lammy also says, past critical comments he made about the president-elect are old news. Sir Keir Starmer has pledged £3.5 million in support for veterans facing homelessness. The funding will go to reducing veteran homelessness programme, which provides a wraparound support for employment and independent living for veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Announcing the funding boost, Sir Keir said veterans represent the very best of our country and that we must honour their sacrifices. Lib Dem leader says whilst it's encouraging, there is always more that can be done.
We can always do more. I'm really proud of how the Liberal Democrats with people like Helen Morgan have stood up to make sure we have higher standards of housing for soldiers as well as veterans. And I'm really proud that we have 7 Liberal Democrat MPs now who served in our armed forces, and we will be encouraging and fighting for the rights of veterans.
And June Spencer, who played matriarch Peggy Woolley in the BBC Radio 4's The Archers, had died at the age of 105. Spencer had played the character since the show's first episode in 1951 and only announced her retirement in 2022 at the age of 103. Credited as being the longest-serving character in the programme, June passed peacefully in her sleep in the early hours of this morning. It's been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says that the Queen's attendance at the Remembrance events will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, with Donald Trump, the new US president, and Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, is the special relationship on death row. Well, that might sound morbid, but concerns are growing over fears that Donald Trump could hike tariffs on the UK, creating a potential trade war. The previously highly critical David Lammy is attempting to insist to the new president that it is not in his interests to hurt your closest allies, but his words might have done that before anyway. And with Labour's love affair and cozying up to Brussels, is this too little, too late? Well, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, always a pleasure. We're about to see, surely, an explosion of unbridled, naked capitalism, the likes of which we've never seen in America, all fuelled by drill, baby drill, low tax, low regulation, potential tariffs on people who don't agree. That could include Britain, high tax, high regulation, obsession with net zero, tied to Brussels. What do you make of the potential prospects of a UK-US trade deal? Is that best for Britain, or could it all be blown by their naked contempt for Trump and perhaps Brussels getting involved?
Well, it does definitely feel like we've hit a bit of a bump in the road for the special relationship. As you say, Donald Trump's economic plan, I mean, it's a relatively blunt tool. It will probably work at making America richer. At least the markets seem to think so. The dollar soared when Donald Trump was elected. There's going to be rampant capitalism, as you say, drill, baby, drill. There's also going to be quite sort of protectionism. We've seen that before from Donald Trump, and we will certainly see it again. There'll be high tariffs on countries that America doesn't much like, probably quite a lot of high tariffs on lots and lots of countries, because Donald Trump wants to bring far more manufacturing, etc., in-house. And you can see why. There probably will be a big uptick for America. What effect will that have on Britain? Well, it could be quite tricky. For a start, it might just be that lots and lots of countries struggle to have a good economic relationship with Donald Trump in this presidency because he's much, much less globalist than his predecessor, much, much more protectionist. Also, of course, there's the awkward relationship between the Starmer administration and the Trump administration. During the election campaign, Trump actually reported Starmer's government to the FDA because 100 Labour activists were sent over to the US to campaign for Kamala Harris. Quite amusingly, Kamala lost in all of the places where those Labour activists
Well, they probably helped Trump. They probably helped Trump because they were interfering in a foreign election. Anyway, I digress.
So Trump believed that did count as foreign interference. That is a pretty nasty row to be having with the leader of the United States. And then, of course, you've got those comments made by both Angela Rayner about J.D. Vance and the comments made by David Lammy about Donald Trump. He called him a Nazi sympathiser back in 2017. Meanwhile, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary who will be helping David Lammy lead the trade negotiations with Donald Trump, was also made very, very derogatory comments about Trump back when he was elected in 2021. So it could well be that it's difficult for the US and the UK to build that relationship. I think also we've got to bear in mind the possibility that a free trade deal between the US and the UK was never that likely. Donald Trump talked up the possibility when he was president, but it didn't actually happen. And then, of course, it completely stalled, was totally put on the back burner by Joe Biden. But I don't think it would be Donald Trump's top priority anyway. And, of course, he now has this very, very awkward relationship with the current administration. So I think we are hitting a bit of a bump in the road for the special relationship, which could be very damaging for Britain because, as I say, it looks like under Donald Trump, America will probably get richer, and we don't want Britain sort of fading into insignificance under that cloud.
And could that be symptomatic of the facts? I mean, look, Sir Keir Starmer seems to spend every spare minute in meetings with European Union partners, with von der Leyen this week in Hungary. It does seem to be that he wants a closer relationship to the European Union, which, let's face it, is having a pretty tough time economically. Germany is closing car plants, and the government collapsed this week because of a disagreement over net zero targets, the banning of gas boilers, the eradication of nuclear power, forcing Germany towards poverty. This seems to be the direction of travel with the EU, and Starmer seems to be more aligned with Brussels than he does with Washington.
Well, it's a really interesting question. I mean, yes, Keir Starmer definitely wants a closer relationship with the EU than the Rishi Sunak government wanted to have. Obviously, Keir Starmer voted for Remain. He wanted to rejoin after the referendum, and he went to Brussels last month, beginning of October, just a couple of months after becoming Prime Minister, to talk about a close relationship on defence, on security, etc. Whether that relationship will come at the expense of a good relationship with America, I mean, that remains to be seen. It could be that Keir Starmer can have those positive economic, positive political relationships with both von der Leyen and Donald Trump. But as I say, I think it will be more difficult to build that relationship with Trump, partly because he is just much more protectionist in nature than his predecessor, partly because he's quite likely to freeze out all sorts of countries, and also, of course, partly because of those comments by David Lammy, the campaigning for Kamala Harris, the tricky relationship between Starmer and Trump, who, let's face it, are not particularly natural bedfellows, either politically or temperamentally, I'd say.
Olivia Utley, magnificent start to the show. Thank you very, very much. Now let's crack on with this conversation. I'd like to speak with the former Conservative MP and the ex-Foreign Office Minister, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. You must be absolutely kicking yourself that the time machine or the cards didn't fall in the correct way. This is meant to be the moment in the past when Boris Johnson sat down with Donald Trump and did a UK-US trade deal to benefit the United Kingdom, a post-Brexit deal looking to the horizon. A, do you think that's the best thing that we should be doing now? And B, do you think that's likely with Sir Keir Starmer at the helm?
Well, good afternoon. You've raised so many important points in the discussion that I was just listening to. If I may just reflect on that, you know, it's now been a few days since that tumultuous election, the result and scale of which has taken many by surprise. You know, Trump is an unorthodox political leader, but it is to the American people, I stress, to choose their own leader. And we over here must respect that. And yet, despite Trump's convincing win. It's not prevented elected voices here in the UK from both commenting not just on his fitness for office, but also second-guessing how Trump 2.0 might affect Europeans' economy and indeed security, as you've just been discussing. Our world is getting more dangerous, not less, and we must continue to work with our closest security ally. I cannot stress that enough. If all the Trump administration or transition team hears from Britain is a barrage of criticism about the election result, coupled with speculation about the US threatening to reduce its military footprint here in Europe or even withdraw from NATO, we should not be surprised if there's indeed less engagement with Europe. And that's not the strategy that's going to keep America close when it's clear that the great power competition with China is likely to dominate Trump's foreign policy. That's very, very clear indeed. So understanding how Trump and his transition team thinks and offering some strategic ideas might help us better achieve the outcomes that we want. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I actually agree with Donald Trump. We do not spend enough money on European defense. He is right there. So let's change that straight away. A blanket increase to 3% on defense spend for all NATO countries. A clear signal to Donald Trump and the new administration that we finally take European security seriously. And we don't just lean on America to watch our backs.
And Tobias, that will come at a huge cost to a lot of European Union nations. Germany only pays 1.87% of its GDP. That's practically half of what Donald Trump will want at a time when its economy is fracturing. We've seen the government collapse. We've seen Volkswagen, BMW and Audi under terrible pressure because of net zero targets and what it's doing to their industry. I digress. The facts are the facts. Our biggest trading partner on the planet is the United States of America. £187 billion in exports last year. Second is Germany on a mere 63 billion. It dwarfs everything else. America is who we should be in bed with. But will those personal differences, the naked contempt for Donald Trump as a person, for his politics, for his policies, particularly around fossil fuels, will the best deal for Britain get put to one side because of political differences?
Well, this is where we need to box cleverer. I understand why you make the arguments about the EU and Brussels. Is it a choice between one or the other? You can't get away from the fact that half of our exports and roughly half our imports are to do with the EU. That's a fact of life. That doesn't mean that we have to have any political leanings towards them. That's what Brexit was all about. But economically, Britain and Europe and indeed America need to recognize the bigger picture here, which we are missing, that our world is splintering into two, and it's China, Russia and Iran through the One Belt, One Road program that is actually designing a new interpretation of our world order where trade is done in a very different way. So as we just have arguments, and maybe the discussion, should we look to the West or should we look to Europe? We're actually missing the bigger picture, that there's a bigger splintering taking place. The BRICS met in Moscow the other day. Most people didn't even see it. Who attended? You had Modi there from India. You had President Xi there from China. You had Moscow there. We thought Putin was persona non grata because of Ukraine. No, you had world leaders from most of Asia attend that conference, either just as watching what's going on or membership as well. And they were looking to design an alternative for the second currency of the dollar. That will change the dynamics of our global economy completely. These are the bigger picture things that we need to be having conversations about with this new administration, because that's where the world is going over the next 4 years.
Tobias Elwood, fascinating stuff. Can I ask you for a yes or no answer? Will the relationship, the special relationship with America, get worse under Keir Starmer's Labour government, yes or no?
It must get better. But you're right to say the special relationship, this deeply rooted alliance, spans military, intelligence, economic, cultural ties, started during the Second World War. It's also about personal relationships. It's about back channels. It's about the trust that you develop between senior decision makers. And right now, I'm afraid this current administration here in the UK has a lot of work to catch up.
So that's a yes. Yes, it will get worse.
No. I'm saying it cannot get worse. We cannot allow it to get worse. America is our closest security ally. And I make the point again. Let's come to terms with the fact that Trump has won. We need to work with America. Our world is getting more dangerous, not less. If we start to fall out with America, then where does the custodians, if you like, of modern democracy take us? All that will do is play into the advantage of Russia, China, and Iran.
Superb stuff. Turbocharged Tobias Elwood. Superb. Thanks for joining us on the show. Excellent as ever. Thank you. Now, just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us here at GB News, because it's the Great British Giveaway, a festive bumper edition. And here's all the details that you need for your chance to win. Good luck with that. Now, coming up, we'll be discussing BBC staff's dismay at the election victory of Donald Trump in leaked messages, with one describing the president-elect as the annoying orange. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. A bunch of snowflakes.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for The Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling or are still battling cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And William heard about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take. She has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake, people like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is this 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday, said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, leaked messages from BBC staff reveal that many were dismayed and even devastated at Donald Trump's victory in the US presidential election. Amongst the messages exchanged were, for those of you who have only just woken up, the annoying orange has just won the election. And somehow I knew this was coming, and yet I'm still disappointed. In response to the messages, a BBC source told GB News that the corporation is infected with Trump derangement syndrome. And to tell us more, I'm now joined from Washington, D.C. by the GB News US correspondent Steve Edgington, the man who blew this exclusive. Steve, perhaps not surprising, but nevertheless astonishing that the snowflakery is just off the scale at the BBC. They hate democracy, and they certainly hate Donald Trump.
It's an interesting batch of leaked messages from internal BBC chats. Now, these messages are available to all BBC staff, including editors, journalists, and senior executives, and yet, to my knowledge, they still remain on the BBC's internal messaging services. This is staff reacting to Donald Trump's election win. And as you say, people say they're disappointed. They describe him as the annoying orange. They use a series of sad, sort of crying emojis to express their, I suppose, sadness and disappointment at Donald Trump's win. And a BBC source did tell GB News that the corporation is infected with Trump derangement syndrome, and that in all the years that this person has worked there, they have never heard a good word about Donald Trump. The BBC actually found in 2020 an article was biased against Donald Trump after one of its journalists used language that the BBC found was more of the journalist's opinion than a professional judgment. And I think the BBC has a long history, ever since Donald Trump came down those escalators all those years ago, of pursuing a tilted perspective against Donald Trump and the Republicans. And they certainly have been accused of bias against Donald Trump and in favor of the Democrats. Look at their previous Washington correspondent, John Soppel. When he was out in Washington, I think he was seen as one of those journalists who really was incredibly critical of Donald Trump, and his personal judgment got in the way of his professional reporting. If you look what he's doing now, he's now a vehemently anti-Trump podcaster with Emily Maitlis. So I think it's no surprise that revealing these messages from a BBC source internally, how they describe Donald Trump, when we know and we can see that output is incredibly biased and critical of the president.
And meanwhile, Steve, this side of the pond, the editor of The Guardian is offering therapy to its staff for the devastating defeat, asking them to offer support to US journalists who may have been impacted by this. But of course, Steve, that is as nothing compared to the enormous liberal media meltdown where you are in America. It's been absolutely astonishing that these people, just like Brexit, they just did not see this coming, and they cannot countenance the idea that millions of people don't share their metropolitan liberal worldview.
Well, I think there is a part of the media here in America and in Britain that have a very similar liberal globalist perspective. And we saw on election night people like Rory Stewart, who predicted Kamala was going to win in essentially a landslide. He said, ignore the polls, Kamala's got this in the bag. He had complete egg on his face. And these people, they don't understand America, they don't understand Americans. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of the media here in America who look down on Trump voters, who see them as bigoted, who never travel to the middle of America. They live on the East and the West coasts. And I think there's been a huge shock in the liberal media yet again in 2024. You would have thought in 2016 perhaps they'd learned their lessons. But again, there seems to have been this huge shock that how could Americans vote for the man that we decided was a fascist, that we decided had praised Hitler? You've got to remember, this was the final weeks of the campaign. The liberal media here in the States spent hours and hours and hours describing Donald Trump as a literal fascist, including Kamala Harris. And they said that one of his former chiefs of staff said that he praised Hitler. So I think they are just in utter shock that their fellow Americans could dare to vote for someone who they described as a fascist. And people just didn't buy it. People have completely mistrust much of the media here in the States. And that's why I think Trump going on Joe Rogan, going on all of these alternative podcast platforms, reached Americans that the mainstream media no longer can reach, because they're simply not trusted to tell the truth. When you're utterly hysterical about Donald Trump, calling him a fascist, calling him quasi-Hitler, people are just going to say, I don't believe you anymore. And what else are you lying about? Why should I ever trust you again? So I think there was a complete shock, and that includes the BBC, as to what happened on Tuesday night.
And Steve, the pollsters got it wrong once again, because they simply failed to reach the working classes, particularly the white working classes. Again, it's deja vu with Brexit. The celebrities, the millionaires, they backed Donald Trump again, just like they did in Brexit. And the media almost entirely backed Donald Trump as it did Brexit. Steve, they're completely out of touch. They completely get it wrong. And meanwhile, those BBC staff, they continue to sob into their soya milk lattes. Thank you very much for joining us. Always a delight, Steve Edgington, for joining us there live and direct from Washington, D.C. Cheers. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has taken aim, saying people in positions of authority who support a gang member, Chris Cabba. We'll be discussing who he might be referring to next. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3:30. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Dutch authorities have launched an independent investigation into an incident on the streets of Amsterdam, which saw Israeli football fans attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. Israel initially said it was planning to send military planes to Amsterdam to fly fans home, before later deciding to send 2 commercial planes instead. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made. The Dutch Prime Minister condemned the anti-Semitic attacks, and before the match there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters. Maccabi supporters reportedly attacked a taxi and set a Palestinian flag on fire. Israeli football fans say the police arrived on the scene too late.
They came really late.
They came too late.
They came when a lot of people were already hurted, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Sir Keir Starmer has pledged £3.5 million in support for veterans facing homelessness. The funding will go to Reducing Veteran Homelessness Programme, which provides wraparound specialist support for employment and independent living for veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Announcing the funding boost, Sir Keir said veterans represent the very best of our country and we must honour their sacrifices. It's been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says the Queen's attendance at Remembrance events will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. And celebrity hairdresser Trevor Sorbie has died at the age of 75 after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. The Scottish-born stylist, who gained fame with the creation of the wedge cut and through his TV appearances, revealed in October he had just weeks to live after his bowel cancer had spread to his liver. A post on social media accounts announced he peacefully passed away, surrounded by his family and his beloved dog. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, A bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south again. A bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up, 6 to 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. A bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well if it is damp and drizzly. Temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues at the moment on the southbound M6 away from Spaghetti Junction down to Castle Bromwich. That's junction 6 to 5. A stop-start following an earlier vehicle needing a tyre change. All lanes are back open though. 2 lanes combed off northbound M69 Coventry up to Hinckley. That's from the M6 junction 2 up towards the A501. A lorry fire means long delays. Still issues around Burton Latimer junction 10 on the A14 in Northamptonshire. Now the eastbound side is closed at junction 10. Queuing back to Broughton at 8. Westbound closed from junction 10 to Kettering 9. Queuing back to junction 11. It's due to a serious collision. And there's queues northbound up the A34 from the M3 at 9 Winchester North through towards South Wanston as an earlier vehicle fire there gets recovered. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:36. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has criticised the so-called dangerous narratives surrounding the police shooting of Chris Cabba, emphasising that online discussions often focused on Cabba's ethnicity. And he warned that such commentary could undermine justice, as it was based on rumours rather than evidence presented in court. Now, he also highlighted that Cabba's gang was linked to 11 shootings in the past year. Well, let's now speak with GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, the row rumbles on over the death of Chris Cabba. Tell us the latest twist.
Well, good afternoon, Martin. Yes, and those comments made by the Met Commissioner last night at the Crime Stoppers annual dinner in Westminster. But it's not just the online comments that will have concerned Sir Mark Rowley, but also demonstrations in person. 2 years ago, when this nation was mourning the death of the late Queen, there were demonstrations in central London demanding justice for Chris Cabba. There were chants of no justice, no peace, and several Labour MPs were seen in central London attending those demonstrations, including Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott and Belle Ribeiro Addy. Now, he didn't name anyone in these comments, Sir Mark Rowley, but he did, it's understood, hint towards the fact that it could have been senior politicians who, he said, were undermining the British justice system and that their commentary could embolden those who wish to do harm to the public. So, what did those people say? Well, Jeremy Corbyn, at the time, said that no family should have to go through the pain Chris Cabba's family have suffered following his killing, and his thoughts are with them as they fight for justice and accountability for his death. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he said, "My thoughts are with Chris Cabba's loved ones today. His death has had a huge impact on Londoners, and in particular black Londoners." Now, that's the concern, I think, that Sir Mark Rowley was pointing to with his comments about the focus on ethnicity. Well, those comments by Sadiq Khan were taken to task by Susan Hall, a London Assembly member, yesterday. And I think we have a clip we can play for you now.
Do you like to apologise
to the police officer that has been found not guilty? And would you like to apologise for the whole attitude around this right from the beginning?
Well, can I put on record my thanks to all our officers, particularly our firearms officers, who do an incredibly difficult job under extraordinary circumstances, under a unique set of pressures. They'd be the first to accept, as indeed all police officers do, that it's really important in a democracy. We have a proper system of checks and balances in relation to how the police are held to account. There is an issue in relation to the system of accountability for firearms officers, and that's one of the reasons why I fully support the review being done by this Home Secretary.
Waffle, waffle, waffle. I asked you a very simple question. Would you like to apologise to the police officer that has now been found not guilty by the jury? Yes or no?
I think it's really important to support our firearms officers, but it's really important to make sure there is a system of accountability.
You're sounding like a parrot, Mr. Mayor. Just answer the question.
Well, Sadiq Khan there, the Mayor of London, refusing to apologise when pushed to do so towards Sergeant Martin Blake, that firearms officer cleared of the murder of Chris Carber at that Old Bailey trial. Now, in his comments last night, the Met Commissioner also said that making this about race is dangerous and unhelpful conversation. He said that I wish, and Martin Blake wishes, that Chris Carber's behaviour hadn't caused the confrontation it did that night, and he had spent the next 10 or 20 years in prison. Of course, we also learnt after the trial finished that Chris Carber had a colourful and extensive criminal past. But I was speaking to some Met officers after Carber's acquittal, and they raised concerns about the statement that Sir Mark Rowley made at the time. He said that any fatal use of force understandably prompts huge concern among communities, particularly in black communities where trust in policing is low. So do we have a situation now, Martin, where Sir Mark Rowley is lamenting the fact that there's such a discussion about ethnicity and innuendo in so much of the commentary around the Chris Carber shooting? But did he not himself make similar associations about trust in the black community right after the acquittal? Now, it seems to some of the police officers I've spoken to that Sir Mark Rowley, of course, has a very difficult job of playing to different crowds, trying to have mixed messages to different groups. But they did raise that concern with me.
And Charlie Peters, it's astonishing, is it not, that so often politicians such as Jeremy Corbyn, such as Sadiq Khan, they seem keen to leap in to defend anybody of an ethnic minority background, irrespective of the crime, before they know the full facts. What's going on?
Well, yes, and people were not privy to the full information about the shooting of Chris Carber 2 years ago. And I have to say, there was enormous outcry on the day of the acquittal of Sergeant Martin Blake. It was a day later that we found out some of the background to the case and about Chris Carber's criminal past. I have to say, I did find the commentary go significantly quieter after that.
Charlie Peters, thank you very much for joining us here with that update on GB News. Thank you very much. Excellent as ever. Now, as we all look ahead to Armistice Day, Royal Historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop has spoken to 101-year-old World War II veteran Betty Webb. It's magnificent. Take a listen.
I've come to Withell in the West Midlands to find one of the Bletchley girls I wrote about 10 years ago. A decade on, and Betty Webb, aged 101, is still flourishing. And her story is amazing. From going to Hitler's Germany before the war, to being selected for work in the mansion in Bletchley Park, till finally, in 1945, she went to the Pentagon in America. Before most people, you have an inside track of what's going on in Germany, don't you? Because as a pen friend, a teenage girl, you go over on an exchange to Germany in 1937.
That's right. I was in Germany for about 3 months, living with a German family, and there were two daughters, and I went to school with them. The only thing that was a little bit disturbing was the fact that, quite obviously, a lot of the local middle-aged people were very concerned about Hitler.
And extraordinary to think that within a matter of years, you're going to be at war, your country at war with their country, these former friends of yours.
Well, it was a situation I had no control over, but it was quite, well, sad in a way, I suppose, because I never communicated with them again.
before conscription's introduced for women in Britain, you've signed up, you've joined the ATS, this female army, and from there, you are selected for Bletchley Park. How did that happen?
After basic training, we were asked what we would like to do. I just put in my notes that I spoke German, and I think that was what prompted the powers that be to send me to an interview in London. And at the end of the day, the major in the intelligence corps, I think he was, he said, "Here you are, get yourself to Bletchley." Gave me a rail wand.
At the end of your Bletchley experience, there's a whole new adventure for Betty Webb, isn't there?
Because absolutely, yes.
You're selected to go to America.
That's right, yes. I was privileged to be sent to Washington, D.C., and work in the Pentagon. Somebody discovered I was rather good at paraphrasing, which was important because had the enemy picked up any of our messages, they would perhaps have realised that we had, in fact, picked them up, and we had hoped that my paraphrasing would disguise that.
I think you were the first female ATS woman, in other words, first British female army member who worked in the Pentagon.
I believe so, yes. There were other British people there, but no women. I was the only woman.
Extraordinary. You've had the most remarkable life, Betty. You've been awarded a Légion d'honneur, and you've been given an MBE, and you're 101, if we're allowed to say that, and you went to the coronation. Have I missed anything out?
Well, looking back over my life, I think I've been extremely privileged.
I don't believe it's only fortunate. I also happen to think you make your own luck. And I've got to say, you've also been the most remarkable friend.
Thank you.
Isn't that absolutely magnificent? Betty there, the very, very best of British. Astonishing story. Wonderful. Now, coming up a little later in the show, the world's your oyster, it seems, if you're an illegal immigrant in London, because Sadiq Khan is being urged by Labour politicians to give free transport to all asylum seekers, including those who are here illegally. Labour claim is to help with essential journeys, but is it yet another blatant abuse of taxpayers' cash? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stéphane Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
So do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good...
Well, I mean, yeah, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people.
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't? It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically. Yeah.
So for all that trouble online, it's actually a real life rendezvous. Which
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stefan Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smash from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Family-run businesses are facing mounting challenges following Chancellor Rachel Reeves's new tax and spending budget. The business property relief that was taken off farmers is also being applied to family firms, and many major employers are reassessing future investment plans. Now, that in itself will surely stifle growth. Let's cross over now to our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who joins us from an industrial generator company in Lurgan, County Armagh. Dougie, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Dougie, last week you expertly critiqued the hike on farmers, the 20% hike, clearly pointing out the £1 million was easily breached. We haven't talked so much about small businesses, and yet they are being hammered by this budget. Tell us more.
Well, yes, welcome to AJ Power here in Lurgan. This has recently been given the King's Award for International Trade, which means that this company, and you think of family firms, Martin, you think of taxi companies or whatever, this company is one of many in Northern Ireland that is still held within inside the family unit. And what you see here is one factory over here, and that makes massive units to put the generators inside. Of course, we were in that factory earlier on, and you'll see there's just little white cabinets there, and they actually bring them in rather than make those cabinets. So what they've decided to do last year was to build another factory, and you can see it behind me. It is absolutely stunning factory, and it's exporting its goods all around the world to 120 countries, no less. And don't forget, exported goods is new money. It's not money that already exists in Britain. It is new money coming into the economy. So this is the very type of thing that the Labour government should be looking at, because, as I say, it's not robbing the state, it's actually bringing new money into the state. And I'm now going to go and talk to Ashley Pickett. He is the chairman and managing director of this company, and he's going to tell us about family firms in Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland has 80,000 businesses employing about 580,000 people. Of those companies, 2 are listed in the LSE. There's about 2,000 foreign-owned companies, and the majority of the rest are family businesses.
Would that be the same in the UK, in the round?
No, the percentages would be a lot different in the UK. There would be less family businesses, but they're still very important.
Now, that's going to hit you tax-wise in death duties, so it's harder for you to hand this down to your family. I mean, what sort of bill would they be talking about, ballpark?
They're most likely looking at a bill of about £4 million, depending on the method of valuation.
Well, £4 million on that method of valuation, and you think to yourself, you know, you have just built this new factory. How many jobs would be in this factory?
The number of jobs in this facility would be about 30. It's part of an overall plan. We've invested about £10 million to get this far, but as of the present moment, everything is stopped.
All those jobs, those extra 30 jobs that would have been coming to Northern Ireland, has stopped because of Rachel Reeves' plan?
Yes, it's an impossible bill to pay. We have to look at how my family could afford to pay the bill. And if you look at what we've been doing, we've been investing, retained profits in the business. We've paid little or no dividends over the years. And in fact, by my calculation, the actual tax bill for the Chancellor would be twice the profits that we've taken out of the business in 21 years.
Well, there you go, Martin. That is from a very highly respected businessman here in Northern Ireland, and he is not happy with what's going on. And these are the type of businesses that really need to be bringing in new money, bringing in new tax that will help fund the public sector. But if you're choking that early, that's it.
Thank you, Dougie Beattie. Small business being hammered big time. Now stick with us, because coming up we've got an exclusive sit down with Nigel Farage. Now here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in, and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, a bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south. Again, a bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up, 6 to 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. A bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well if it is damp and drizzly. Temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. North Yorkshire issues for the westbound A174, closed from Hemlington through towards the A19 at Stainton. A multi-vehicle collision means slow approaching that closure. Now the M61 southbound, all the traffic currently being held just from Horwich at Junction 6 through towards West Halton at Junction 5, queuing at the scene of a collision. Both sides of the A14 still closed at Junction 10, Burton Latimer, queuing back towards Junction 8 for Broughton heading east and back towards Junction 11 heading west at the scene of a serious collision. The southbound M3, the exit slip to the clockwise M25 is blocked at Junction 2 for recovery of an earlier vehicle fire is very slow. And the A49 northbound Marlbrook up towards the A44 Leominster blocked and queuing due to a collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,000 and £25 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home? Talking about? Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. On today's show, with Donald Trump, the new US president, and Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, it's a special relationship on death row. Well, many believe a trade deal with Trump is best for Britain. But will Labour's unbridled contempt for Trump and their love affair with Brussels, will it kill the deal? And the mayor of Amsterdam has condemned a brutal attack on Israeli football fans by a pro-Palestine mob as sickening. But this attack had nothing to do with football and everything to do with anti-Semitism. We'll have a full discussion on that. And the world's your oyster if you're an illegal immigrant, as the London Assembly passes the motion in favour of free bus travel for people seeking asylum, and that includes illegal immigrants. Now, the Labour Party claims to help with essential journeys, but is this yet another blatant abuse of taxpayers' money? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. So the future's bright. The future's orange. Donald Trump, of course, the new president of the United States. And it's fair to say the US stock market has gone gangbusters. Shares are through the roof in America, set for corporation tax cuts, set for cheaper energy, set for less regulation, turbocharged capitalism. And is that not the right trading partner that we should be allying ourselves to? And yet, they can't stop calling him a fascist. They can't stop calling him a buffoon. And they can't stop their love affair with Brussels. Will all of these things stop what's best for Britain? That's our big discussion this hour. Let me know what you think about that by going to gbnews.com/your say. But before we kick off the next hour, here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Our top story this hour: Dutch authorities have launched an independent investigation into an incident on the streets of Amsterdam, which saw Israeli football fans attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. Israel initially said it was planning to send military planes to fly home the fans, before later deciding to send 2 commercial planes instead. The public prosecutor said 62 arrests have been made. The Dutch Prime Minister condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire. Israeli football fans say the police arrived on the scene too late.
Really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hurt, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Back in the UK, the government will look to persuade Donald Trump that harming the UK by hiking tariffs is not in his interest. That's coming from the Foreign Secretary amid fears of a looming trade war. David Lammy said he would seek to get across to the United States that hurting your closest allies is not in Trump's interest. Trump's pledge to raise tariffs on imports into the US could hit the US economy. Mr. Trump has said he wants to increase tariffs on goods imported from around the world by 10%, rising 60% on items from China. This also comes as Mr. Lammy says past critical comments he has made about the president-elect are old news. Sir Keir Starmer has pledged £3.5 million in support for veterans facing homelessness. The funding will go to the Reducing Veteran Homelessness programme, which provides wraparound specialist support for employment and independent living for veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Announcing the funding boost, Sir Keir said, "Veterans represent the very best of our country and we must honour their sacrifices." Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey says there is always more that can be done.
we can always do more. I'm really proud of how the Liberal Democrats, with people like Helen Morgan, have stood up to make sure we have higher standards of housing for soldiers as well as veterans. And I'm really proud that we have 7 Liberal Democrat MPs now who served in our armed forces, and we will be encouraging and fighting for the rights of veterans.
Some sporting news now, and Tottenham Hotspur have been charged with misconduct by the Football Association in relation to homophobic chants by their supporters during a match against Manchester United earlier this season. They were understood to be aimed at Arsenal's head coach, Mikel Arteta, and United's midfielder, Mason Mount. The club now face sanction from the national governing body over the matter and have been given until November 13th to respond to the charge. And it's been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says the Queen's attendance at Remembrance events will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. And June Spencer, who played matriarch Peggy Woolley in BBC Radio 4's The Archers, has died at the age of 105. Spencer has played the character since the show's first episode in 1951 and only announced her retirement in 2022 at the age of 103. Credited as being the longest-serving character in the programme, June passed peacefully in her sleep in the early hours of this morning. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, we've got a cracking hour ahead. Let's get stuck in with Donald Trump, the new US president, and Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister. It's a special relationship on death row. That might sound morbid, but there are concerns, growing concerns, over fears that Donald Trump could hike tariffs on the UK, creating a potential trade war. The previously highly critical David Lammy is attempting to insist to the new president that it is not in his best interest to hurt your closest allies, although he's been doing his best to hurt that relationship for some time with his comments. I digress. With Labour's love affair and cozying up to Brussels also on the table, is this too little too late? Well, I'm now joined in the studio by GB News political correspondent Olivia Otley and also by the Deputy Chair of Facts for EU, Ben Phillips. Welcome to the studio, both of you. Olivia, let's start with you with the politics. It's fair to say that Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party and Donald Trump's Republican Party aren't the most obvious of bedfellows. Particularly the Labour Party can't seem to stand him personally. David Lammy, Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, all of them queuing up to have a pop in the past. And now, politically, are they able to be competitive or ally themselves in terms of their economic standpoints? Trump, turbocharged, low taxation, low regulation, driven by fossil fuels, drill, baby drill, with potential risks of tariffs on anybody who doesn't agree. That could be us, because Starmernomics is high tax, high regulation, obsessed with net zero and tied to Brussels. Where does that leave the special relationship?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the special relationship has hit a little bit of a bump in the road. Starmer and Trump obviously are not natural bedfellows in any way. I think temperamentally they're very, very different. Starmer's quite a sort of slow-moving, a bit of a technocrat, perhaps. Doesn't love thinking on his feet. He's very well prepared, though. And obviously Donald Trump has a very, very different style, occasionally perhaps shooting his mouth off a little bit. So I think that just sort of temperamental difference is quite difficult. Then, of course, you get to the deeper politics of it. As you say, Donald Trump, he has a pretty blunt instrument for fixing the American economy, but it will probably work. He wants to drill as much as possible. He wants to massively expand fossil fuels, get the American economy just moving again as quickly as possible, where Keir Starmer is going very cautiously indeed. And Rachel Reeves's budget wasn't about growth, I mean, almost at all. It was all about just sort of putting some money from one pot into another and raising taxes for the public sector, etc., etc. So really different approaches on the economy. Then you've got the personal jibes that have been flung at the Trump administration by various members of the shadow cabinet. Obviously, David Lammy, most notably, called Trump a Nazi sympathiser back in 2017. But actually, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, who is leading on the conversation with the Trump administration about a free trade deal, he made very derogatory comments about Donald Trump back in 2021. So that's awkward too. And then you've got the bald fact of the matter, which is that Donald Trump has a very, very different approach globally than his predecessor did. He's much more protectionist. He's much more wants to bring everything in-house. You can see the logic for that. We saw over the COVID pandemic that any country that heavily relies on numerous other countries gets themselves in a bit of a problem with supply chains when you hit something like a global pandemic. So you can see why Donald Trump is sort of less interested in globalism and more interested in protectionism than his predecessors. But that means that's going to harm America's relationship with lots of other countries, Britain among them, because it could well be that Donald Trump slaps high tariffs on Britain and makes it very difficult for trade to go either from the UK to the US or vice versa. Donald Trump sounded relatively warm about a trade deal with the UK back when he was in power, but it never actually happened. That trail went completely cold with Joe Biden, who had no interest in a trade deal with the UK. It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out with Donald Trump now, because, yes, he has sounded relatively enthusiastic before, but I think this time around his campaign has been much more protectionist than even the last time round. And, of course, that relationship with Keir Starmer is much less good than the relationship that Donald Trump had with Boris Johnson. So I think it could be a bit of a problem for the UK.
And Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact he's no fan of the European Union. He sees them as a protectionist bloc. He sees them as preventing USA from going bespoke, from going ad hoc. And wasn't the point of Brexit that we were meant to be unshackled from the European Union bloc? We were meant to be nimble and quick. We were meant to be free to do precisely these kind of bespoke trade deals. In fact, we've already done, I think, 8 deals with the United States, individual states. Of course, there are 50 of them. But would Brussels, who Keir Starmer has spent a lot of time since it's been made our premier, cozying up to at numerous conferences all around the shop. This week, of course, he was in Hungary, in Budapest. Would the European Union be happy with him saying, do you know what? I'm doing a trade deal with America. It might be bad news for you lot, but never mind. See you later. Not going to happen, is it?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, because definitely Keir Starmer wants a closer relationship with the EU than any of his Conservative predecessors. He went to Brussels as one of his first foreign trips as the Prime Minister back at the beginning of last month. He said that he wants a closer relationship on defence and security. Those are the issues which it's easy to talk about. It's pretty clear that he wants closer cooperation with the EU on other issues too, including immigration. So would Keir Starmer theoretically be prepared to anger the European Union for the potential of a US-UK trade deal, or is he keener on keeping Ursula von der Leyen back on his side, having worked so hard to get her there? And von der Leyen is sounding pretty warm about Keir Starmer at the moment. I mean, all of that said, yes, Donald Trump did talk up a UK-US relationship, and yes, a US-UK trade deal, and yes, in theory, he was sort of pro-Brexit. I do have to reiterate that UK-US trade deal did not happen under Donald Trump's presidency. So it could be that he's kind of dangling that carrot in front of us and wouldn't actually give into it at all. So perhaps Keir Starmer, has the right idea going down the Brussels route rather than the US route. But it does remain to be seen. And of course, on the face of it, it does look as though the US economy is on an upwards trajectory, whereas you could argue that the EU economy is on a bit of a downwards trajectory.
Well, that's the precise topic of our next guest's conversation. I'm bringing in now Ben Phillips, who's the Deputy Chair of Facts for EU. Ben, welcome to the studio. Thank you. A pleasure to have your company. 2 excellent reports out this week by Facts for EU, and they both state the cold, hard data. Let's look at the numbers. Put politics to one side for a minute. And can you explain to us why you believe the best route forward for the United Kingdom is towards Washington and not Brussels.
Well, indeed. Well, thank you, Martin. I mean, I come wearing two hats, as it were, as Communications Director of CIB and also as a representative of, as I say, our principal research affiliate, Brexit Facts for EU. So thank you for that. And the data they've come up with is absolutely extraordinary. If we look at in raw hard terms, when we're looking at export market values for 2023, by far and away our biggest export market is the United States.
Yeah, then we've got a graphic of that. There we go.
That's
Look
at that.
Talk us through those figures there. You can see that proud, flying high Star-Spangled Banner there. What does that tell us?
Absolutely. So the value of that, of exports to the United States, nearly £190 billion. I mean, we just need to get our heads around that actual sum of money. It is simply extraordinary. The other thing that that is equally extraordinary is that the number two in the league, way down there, but nonetheless the Eurozone's principal economy is Germany on 63 billion. So in other words, the US is almost 3 times more important to the UK than the EU's number one economy, Germany. And we know how weak the other Eurozone economies are as well.
Interestingly, that next is Ireland. Ireland, of course, has a very favourable corporation tax regime. They were able to negotiate, was it 15% corporation tax? And as a consequence, they're much more nimble. And then we have the Netherlands in 4th place, 52 billions, France on 44 billions, and then China 6th on 33 billion. So putting the politics to one side, Ben Phillips, that surely tells us, and this is without Trumponomics, this is without a slash of corporation tax, this is without a turbocharged fossil fuel-driven economy, they're going to become even more dominant, aren't they?
Even more. Yes, what's interesting, actually, in that full list is that of the UK's top 30 global export markets, only 11 are EU countries. And if you look at the long-term trends, you know, the future is the United States, the future is Southeast Asia and so on, these growing tiger economies and so on. That is definitely the trend, and these figures certainly bear that out.
Cool. And we have a second graphic now we'd like to get on the screen, and this shows us the relative importance, does it not, of the export markets to the US and to the European Union. What's on our screens there, Ben Phillips?
Yeah, indeed. Well, you see here, since 2016, UK exports to Trump's America have grown 1.6 times faster than exports to the EU. So again, there's a historic trend going on there. The UK's exports of goods and services to the US compared to the EU 27, nearly 70%. UK exports to the EU...
That's a 70% increase since Brexit.
That's right. And to the EU, it's 44%.
Well, hang on a minute. I thought the UK fell apart when we left the European Union. You're telling me there that despite Brexit, there's been a 44.2% increase in exports to the EU.
That's right. Our export markets to the EU have held up in spite of Project Fear and everything else. And so again, that was a false whistle. And again, if you just look at in numbers terms, the value of UK exports to the EU 27 is £350 billion, which is a 40% share of total exports. So they are holding up in spite of the fact that we've left. But again, look at the rest of the world, £505 billion, nearly 60% of a share of total exports.
And so what that tells us, if we just put our personal politics to one side, if Sir Keir Starmer's political viewpoint doesn't align with Donald Trump's, who doesn't align with Ursula von der Leyen's, if we just look at the metrics, just look at the cold, hard data, and isn't that actually a good way to do politics? Look at what's best for Britain. The conclusion, Ben Phillips, is what?
The conclusion is the future's bright, the future's orange, the future's Donald, the future is future trade deals with the US. We've already got 8. There's Texas is on the way. Kemi Badenoch, she signed a memorandum of understanding back in March. You know, the Texas economy alone is enormous, $2.6 trillion GDP. So this is the way to go. It will be very, very interesting to see where Keir Starmer and his colleagues pivot on this one going forward, and we will certainly monitor it.
Super. So that's Ben Phillips, the Deputy Chair of Facts for EU, and of course Olivia Utley. An excellent conversation there. And there we have it. If we just put our politics to one side and just look at the data, it seems to say that the best deal for the UK might be aligned towards Washington and not Brussels. That's what the numbers say at any rate. Now, just 2 weeks left to grab a chance to win Christmas on Us here at GB News in the latest Great British Giveaway. It's a festive bumper edition. And here's the details that you need for your chance to win Christmas on Us.
There's only 2 weeks remaining to grab your chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's 20,000. Check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Very best of luck with that. Now, coming up, we'll be speaking with a Liberal Democrat MP who is calling on the government to reverse its inheritance tax changes to farmers. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons, obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel. Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, there's continued anger from farmers over the government's inheritance tax changes, which is being described as a family farm tax. Now, in North Norfolk, 127 farms could be affected by the changes as the local MP, Steph Aquarone, urges Labour to reverse the decision as he claims it will cripple the farming communities in his constituency. I'm delighted to say I can now speak with the Liberal Democrat MP for North Norfolk, Steph Aquarone. Steph, welcome to the show. We've been speaking to farmers since this inheritance tax hike was announced here on GB News. We've had the president of the NFU on. A lot of them, all of them, feeling very, very aggrieved by the situation. They see it as a cruel tax on farms that could split up generations of farm businesses. Tell us about the situation in North Norfolk.
Well, thank you for having me on, Martin. It's my first time on GB News, and I hope the first of many. I'm really glad you're covering this, because out here in rural North Norfolk, this family farm tax, and I totally agree with you dubbing it that, is really causing a lot of concern and anxiety for the farming community. I think the first thing to say is that there is an issue in this country with rich people buying lots of land as a way of avoiding inheritance tax. And I absolutely support trying to stop that. But this policy is not going to stop that. It's still going to be tax advantageous to land bank. And yet it's also having the, I think, probably unintended consequence of really worrying and making some family farms feel like there is no viable future for them in the industry. I've had dozens of them contact me since the announcement and since the budget itself, but I've also been out to farms to speak to people and pick up some of their stories.
And what's been fascinating about this, Steph, is this assumption. This only affects the mega wealthy. It only affects the super farms. But we've told so many stories here on GB News of the acreage. When you include the buildings, when you include the machinery, the equipment, the £1 million mark, Steph, is very, very easily breached. And you're nodding your head there vociferously. I'm assuming that's the case also in your constituency.
Absolutely. I spoke to a farmer in Itteringham just this morning at about 8:30, and he was saying, take a tiny farm, something barely bigger than a small holding. You might have £100,000 worth of animals. You might have, if you own all your kit, you might easily have 250, 300 grand's worth of kit. You add a house into there and you're at the £1 million, even before you take into account any acreage whatsoever. And so I don't think this was a policy designed to have this implication, this impact. And the impact is, it's not right now, of course. It's not a sudden windfall tax on land ownership. It's about the future. And it's already hard enough to get the next generation of farmers to enter into food production, something this country badly needs. It's made even harder if they can't see a viable way of doing it. And it's easy to say, oh, I'll just go and get a loan for the tax amount or pay it off over 10 years. We're talking about an industry that is barely viable at the moment. People already have assets that they're using to secure loans against to keep the farm afloat. It's completely unviable to suddenly say, do you know what, it doesn't matter, you can pay it over 10 years, you can get financing. There just isn't the headroom as things stand. There's other things we need to do, of course, to fix farming, but this is certainly not helping.
And the NFU president, Tom Bradshaw, he was on the show last Friday before that crunch meeting with the Environment Minister, Steve Reed. He also came on the show on Tuesday, and he simply says he wants this entire plan to be scrapped. Not even negotiating about the threshold, the £1 million threshold. They're having some speculation that 10 million might actually get after those big landholders you're talking about. And we can all agree perhaps it should be means tested to make sure that those who are gaming the system, they can be actually singled out. But tell us about the situation in your constituency. We're hearing stories about generations of farmers, way back 3, 4, 5 plus generations of farmers, simply figuring out that this could force them to sell the business and end generations of farming. There must be a huge amount of pressure, Steph, on the mental health of people in your constituency.
Oh, and farming already suffers from enormous and unacceptable levels of mental ill health, something which needs separately addressing through investment in our health services. And I and thousands of people in my constituency, I'm sure, welcome the, albeit quite vague, details on the investment in the NHS that was also part of the budget. But let's make no mistake, the farming community here is really worried about it. I spoke in my budget speech about a farm just 3 miles north of where I'm sitting at the moment. It's been farmed for 5 generations. The son, the current operator and manager, isn't just a farm manager. They're also a carer for their father who has late-stage Alzheimer's, and it's leaving his mother sleepless at night because she is having to face the possibility of selling the family farm or part of the family farm in order to be able to give them some security and financial tenure. This is no way to treat the people that produce our food. And I think, this is you mentioned in your ident about it, or the previous feature about this not really being about necessarily party politics. And I think this is well beyond party politics. I know your previous item was about economics and trade. Well, actually, we've got an economics and trade issue here right in this country right now, which is about where our food comes from. And it's bigger than family farm tax. Of course it is. We need to give greater strength and power and fairness to food producers. We need to prioritise food production over other things. We need to have a sensible conversation about what realistic food production capacity we have, but we have to make things secure for farmers if we want to be able to produce food in this country.
And Steph, I totally agree with everything you're saying, everything. And we're having this protest in November on the 19th at Westminster, just outside here. Are any of your constituents planning to rock up and voice their anger towards this Parliament?
Well, I am planning to rock up and voice my anger about it because I believe in representing the people in my constituency, and I am prepared to die in a ditch over any square inch of what happens here in North Norfolk. It's something which we Liberal Democrats believe in more than anything else, is representing the people that are in our constituencies, their ways of life, their properties and their business. And that's exactly what I'll be doing on the 19th. I've also got meetings arranged in Westminster with some of my farmers up here in North Norfolk. And I think this is about constructive challenge. I believe actually in direct action. In a very previous life, I've taken tractors through the centre of London in the past. I'm pleased that farmers are putting their argument to government. And I think we should be doing that in a critical but constructive, peaceful but powerful way. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that myself in a few weeks' time.
Steph Ackroyd, absolute delight to have you on the show. We've got so much in common here, and I've invited so many farmers who are attending that protest on the 19th to come into the studio. Please come and join us here in the studio, have a cup of tea, and come and tell us what you make of your constituents on that day. It'd be wonderful to get you in and to shake hands. We totally agree on this. As you say, this isn't a party political thing. This is a thing about doing the right thing. Now, that's Steph Ackroyd, the Liberal Democrat MP for North Norfolk. Thank you for your time on this Friday afternoon. Thank you very much. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including our exclusive sit-down interview with Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. That's coming next, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4:30. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Our top story, Dutch media is reporting that far-right leader Geert Wilders will meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport, following attacks on Israeli football fans. This also follows the independent investigation launched by the Dutch authorities into an incident on the streets of Amsterdam, which saw Israeli football fans attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made, and the Dutch Prime Minister has condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire. Israeli football fans say the police arrived on the scene too late.
Really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hoarded, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Sticking with some football news, Tottenham Hotspur have been charged with misconduct by the Football Association in relation to homophobic chants by their supporters during a match against Manchester United earlier this season. They were understood to be aimed at Arsenal's head coach Mikel Arteta and United's midfielder Mason Mount. The club now face sanction from the national governing body over the matter and have been given until the 13th of November to respond to the charge. A people smuggler who helped migrants cross the Channel on a small boat and posted videos from successful customers has been found guilty of immigration offences. 34-year-old Amanj Hassan Zada from Preston advertised on social media and shared clips of people thanking him for his services. The National Crime Agency linked him to 3 separate crossings from France to the UK in November and December last year, involving Kurdish migrants. The groups had travelled through Eastern Europe into Germany, Belgium and France before making it to Britain. However, the NCA believes that the Iranian national was involved in many more similar operations. And it has been announced that the Princess of Wales is to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says that the Queen's attendance at the Remembrance events will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, a bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south again. A bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up, 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. Bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well if it is damp and drizzly. Temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Edinburgh westbound M8 at the M9 interchange junction 2. There was an earlier shed load in a bin lorry fire on the exit slip. That's still being dealt with as partially blocked and slow going. Traffic at a stand, southbound M61, 2 lanes shut from Horwich at junction 6 down towards West Horton at junction 5. A collision causing delays on surrounding routes. Stop-start on the northbound M6 between the Stafford services and Stoke at 15. That follows an earlier bump there. Queue southbound for the M3 now, the exit slip road to the clockwise M25 at junction 2 blocked and queuing. An earlier van fire still being recovered. A lane closed on the eastbound M27 exit slip coming off at Hedge End junction 7. There's a breakdown there causing delays on the approach. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Nigel Farage is in Newport today for his party's Welsh conference. And he took the time to speak to GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Nigel Farage, thank you for joining us on GB News. We're here in Newport, where you're taking the fight to Labour in the Senate elections in 2026. What's the message? Because this is Labour heartland, isn't it? How are you going to convince those voters? What are you saying to them?
Well, the Labour national government's bad enough, but have a look at what Labour have done in Wales with devolved powers over the last few years. The biggest waiting lists for the NHS in the whole of the country, failing education, lunatic woke policies on a scale that is almost unimaginable, not to mention 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and of course, because of the devotion to the net zero agenda, primary steelmaking in South Wales at an end. I think they failed completely. I think the voters in Wales don't look at the Conservative Party as really a viable alternative. And so our aim, our ambition, is to replace the Conservatives as the main opposition to Labour and to take the fight to them in those Senate elections. And if you believe the opinion polls that are out this morning, we already are making real progress.
Do you think proportional representation helps you with that?
Well, of course, it's going to be 16 constituencies fought under the D'Hondt system, which is exactly the same way that the European Parliament elections worked in this country. I think under that system, I've got quite a good track record.
Right, well, you've just come back from America, so let's talk about Donald Trump. How does Britain benefit, do you think, from a second Trump presidency?
Well, number one, I mean, he's actually a pro-British president, which Joe Biden very clearly wasn't. He's got a huge soft spot for this country. And that gives us some advantages. I mean, obviously, there's, in terms of trade, we are still the biggest foreign investor in America, and they're the biggest foreign investor here. But the important thing is Trump is bringing in a tariff regime. We'll be subject to 10% tariffs on everything we try to send to America, unless we negotiate. And if we negotiate, not only can we get a removal of those tariffs, but I still think the prize of a free trade deal is there.
But do you trust this government to do? We are where we are. You might say, in theory, that's a good idea. Can this Labour government do that? Because if they can't, surely the Trump presidency is a very bad thing for the UK, for the UK economy.
Well, I mean, you'd argue the same if we were still part of the European Union. But we now have our own trade policy. We don't need to refer to Brussels. We can strike our own deal with America in whatever shape we choose. And this may give Starmer, our Prime Minister, a slight dilemma. Does he do what's right for us, or does he do what Brussels tell him to do? But the opportunity is there. Clearly, in terms of intelligence sharing, that's another area where, the Five Eyes intelligence group, the English-speaking nations exist, but there's an enhanced form of that between us and the Americans. And again, there's a big conflict for Starmer because the European Union are developing their own intelligence agency where, in theory, if we signed up to it, we'd have to share everything with them. So there's some very big decisions for this government to make, but an instinctively pro-British US president is a good thing.
Your role specifically in your relationship with Donald Trump, 69% of Brits, new polling, disapprove of Donald Trump. So if you're seen as being close to the president, does that actually, in a way, politically damage reform for attracting those swing voters that you want at the next election if you're too close to someone that they fundamentally dislike?
I've been seen to be close to Donald Trump for 9 years. So what? I mean, whether people like him or not, and frankly, given the media coverage of Donald Trump in this country, it's not very surprising that a lot of people don't approve of him. But the fact is, he is the president of the USA. It is our most important single nation trading partner. Without America, we are frankly defenseless in an increasingly dangerous world, and that's what matters.
Just want to ask about Jonathan Powell, the new appointment today. He's a former Blair-era chief of staff in Number 10. Now he's National Security Advisor. What's your take on that appointment?
It's just part of the old regime. I mean, these are people who were anti-Brexit. These are people who are totally relaxed about open-door immigration. These are people who see our role on the world stage to frankly give organisations like the UN or anybody else more say and more power over us. And these are people that represent the old politics, not, even though we have a Labour government with a massive majority, there is a big kind of new politics on its way. Powell can never be part of it.
On that Labour government, David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, we all know he said a lot of things negatively about Donald Trump in the past. Is that disqualifying as Foreign Secretary, or should we, as he's saying, it's old news, look past it? Can we have a relationship with the Trump administration?
I don't think the fact that he was rude about Donald Trump of itself disqualifies. I think what is more harmful to the relationship is the fact the Labour Party sent 100 staffers to campaign for Kamala Harris, just a few weeks ago. And in diplomatic terms, that was very stupid. I think where David Lammy is going to have a problem is over the surrender of the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands. I got up in Parliament and said to him, why are you doing this? Immediately before a US presidential election, where there could be a change, as indeed has happened. And I think you're going to find that the American military view the base at Diego Garcia as being an essential asset. So I can see a bust up there.
Just finally, a couple of ones. Assisted dying bill, that's going to be in Parliament by the end of this month. How are you going to vote on that?
I would need a lot of convincing to support it. I really would. I look at the way assisted dying is taking place in Canada, and frankly, it gives me the shivers. Now, look, I know there are people that die in the most appalling circumstances. As an MEP, I was lobbied on that issue more than any other during my 20 years there. So I completely understand why people want this to be law, but I need a lot of convincing that it won't be abused. And unless that happens, I'll vote against.
Very last quick question. When is Donald Trump visiting your constituency in Clacton?
He never said he was. He never said he was. But one good thing, he will be addressing both houses of Parliament, because this speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, is a proper speaker, unlike the little creep Burko that was there before him.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
There we go, there was Nigel Farage talking exclusively to GB News there. Quick couple of points that leapt out on Wales. He said the country is failing. Lunatic, woke policies, 20-mile-an-hour limits, net zero policies that killed steel making. On Donald Trump, he says we need our own trade policy. Does Starmer do what's right for us, or does he do what Brussels tells him to do? And he said on the Chagos Islands, he thinks that's going to be David Lammy's biggest problem, allied to the fact the Labour Party were harmed, he said, by sending 100 staffers to campaign for Kamala Harris in that election. Loads to sink our teeth into, and coming up we'll be discussing Donald Trump, who is mulling a peace plan for the war in Ukraine. But it could mean that British troops are on the border. We'll discuss this next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week is Chocolate Week, the ultimate celebration of everything rich, sweet and indulgent.
Yes, and we now have the best person in the studio with us to satisfy all of your chocolate cravings. We're joined now by master chocolatier Ollie the Choc. Ollie,
hello.
Really
Hey,
good to see you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And you brought some of your chocolate in with you.
I did. I brought some tasting samples. You're very welcome to help yourself.
So what have you got here? Tell us.
So this is my signature chocolate. I call it the Holy Grail. It's got sea salt flakes, crushed Oreo, caramel fudge pieces, very Moorish.
I love a caramel and salt combo, just, you know. I feel like you see it everywhere now. Look,
you won't be disappointed.
Look, I want everyone to see a close-up of this one. Can we get a shot on this one? So this is Oreo, there we are, caramel and salt. Do you want to try some?
You go first.
Help yourselves. And then this bar of chocolate is a little bit of a wild card. That's a mystery flavour, so...
OK, I love a mystery.
I'm not going to tell you what that is.
Hold on this one. This one's amazing.
Are you?
Oreo, caramel.
That's my biggest seller.
I'll keep my palate clean for this. So this is a mystery flavour.
You've got to guess what that is.
Is that a nut in there, I see? Right, here we go. Ready?
I'm not saying anything.
Talk us through.
Very crunchy.
For me, I'm all about textures in chocolate.
Me too.
It has got a good crunch to it, hasn't it? It's not the kind of flavour that you would expect.
Oh, I can't get it.
Is it sweet? Is it salty?
Wait, no, it's salty, yeah.
It's
okay.
salty.
Hang on, bit more.
Okay.
Bit more.
I mean, just keep going.
Crisps? Wait,
It is crispy, it's crunchy. Could it be crisps?
I think it could be crisps. Yeah, it's crisps.
So what flavour?
Salt and vinegar. Cheese and onion.
Yes, nailed it. You know.
Oh, you're much better than me.
Love that.
Do you know what? I think I've got a bit of a cold, so my taste buds are
Oh, you're going to blame that, are you?
That's my excuse. That's delicious.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, could Donald Trump be the president to bring an end to the ongoing war in Ukraine? Well, he certainly thinks so himself. And details have emerged of a potential peace plan where the president-elect could call on European troops to enforce an 800-mile buffer zone between Russia and the Ukrainian armies as part of a plan to freeze the war between the two countries. However, the suggestion has been met with some criticism, including from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky himself, who has warned that any attempts to make peace by appeasing Russia would mean suicide for Europe. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio in Westminster with the global affairs correspondent at the iPaper, Molly Blackall. Molly, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time. Let's start with this much touted, I can end the war in 24 hours. Yeah, right. But seriously, what do you think an arrangement could look like that both sides would be happy with to end this?
Well, I think that's been the question that's been on everybody's minds, really, since that invasion in the start of 2022. I think fundamentally, and what makes this so difficult to speculate on, is that it's all going to be down to Zelensky here. And even his allies, staunch allies in the UK and the US, have been really reluctant to set out what terms they think might be acceptable. They've always been very clear this has to be a decision for him. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky says that anything which means he would be ceding territory to Russia is not acceptable. Of course, we don't know the extent to which that's public posturing. He's never going to say publicly that he would accept any loss of land, but it does seem like that's a hard and fast rule for him. So the question really is whether he's going to be able to compromise on that at all, or whether he's going to have to, get a full military victory before he's willing to talk.
If Donald Trump gets them around the table, irrespective of what we think of Donald Trump, it would have achieved something that hasn't been achieved to date. And it certainly, would it not, undermine attempts, for example, by the European Union or by any nation states to get this going. So do you think a deal can be done?
Again, it's really hard to call, but I think there's certainly hope that, again, whatever you think of Donald Trump, he is a fresh character into the mix. Of course, he hasn't been in the White House since that invasion, and he is known to be perhaps friendlier with Putin than other leaders might be. That may potentially put him in a unique position to bring both parties to the table. But I think there's a risk of oversimplifying this, which Donald Trump does occasionally do, and indicate that it's simply a case of sitting them both in a room and making them hash it out. Many people, as you've acknowledged, have sort of tried and failed to bring this to a resolution. But I think there's hope that even among people who are sceptical of Trump, that perhaps he might be able to break the deadlock that there's been. OK, Molly, can we talk about the special relationship? We've got Donald Trump, we've got Sir Keir Starmer. They're diametrically opposed in many, many ways. Do you think that this special relationship could suffer as a consequence of that? They're not natural bedfellows, I think that's fair to say. And I'm sure that there were private groans, behind the scenes here when he won the presidency. But at the same time, the special relationship has been a long-standing relationship. And many of those organs, diplomatic channels, economic ties, aren't just going to go away overnight. Of course, Trump has been in the presidency before. Nothing fell apart then. And so I think everyone people are going to act like adults about this, but certainly there has been bad blood. Of course, Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been, shall we say, critical of Donald Trump prior to this, and more recently, Trump was accusing the Labour government of foreign interference because of volunteers going over and campaigning for Kamala Harris. So, Molly, we've got a quick minute before the end of the hour. Do you think Nigel Farage could be useful to bridging these two diametrically opposed regimes? I've spent the day asking people that, and people are pretty 50-50. Some ex-ambassadors think there's no harm having, more skin in the game and a greater cast of characters to have a relationship. He is close to Trump, and so that could be used. But I think for the most part, Labour aren't going to be keen to have him, and I wonder if they would trust their key kind of political opponent to be their messenger boy.
Nigel would like to happen, but would Sir Keir Starmer allow it?
I think the musings that we're hearing from within Labour is probably no. There's definitely not any talk of any kind of official posting. Him being ambassador does not seem to be on the cards. I think the question is more whether the Foreign Office might be able to leverage him with an odd dinner with Trump, you know, if they have that sort of friendly relationship and get him to whisper in his ear. Farage, as you say, would certainly like to think that he can add value there. I think some ex-ambassadors are dubious.
Superb, you there. Thank you very much. That's Molly Blackall, the Global Affairs correspondent at the iPaper. Now, plenty more coming up in the next hour, including details of motions passed by London Assembly. It's free travel for illegal immigrants. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, a bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south again. A bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up, 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. Bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well if it is damp and drizzly. Temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Edinburgh westbound M8 at the M9 interchange junction 2. Now the exit slip there's partially blocked. A delay is due to a shed load from the earlier bin lorry fire. Seeing queues back along the main carriageway back towards the Calder junction. Southbound M61's really struggling. Heading from Horwich down towards West Halton. That's junction 6 to 5. Big queues, 2 lanes combed off at the scene of a collision. Now the bump northbound on the M6 is cleared up towards Stoke at 15. Still stop-start. All lanes are back open though. Berkshire eastbound M4, Wokingham at 10 to Maidenhead at 8. Still slow going. There's a breakdown blocking a lane. A breakdown to eastbound on the M27 in Hampshire. A lane closure in place. Hamble at 8 to junction 9 for Fareham. Slow on the approach there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could win. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Hope you're having a happy Friday. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, with Donald Trump, the new US president, and Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, it's a special relationship on death row. Many believe a trade deal with Trump is best for Britain, but will Labour's unbridled contempt for Trump and their love affair with Brussels kill any deal? And the mayor of Amsterdam has condemned a brutal attack on Israeli football fans by a pro-Palestine mob as sickening. But this attack had absolutely nothing to do with football and everything to do with anti-Semitism. And the world's your oyster if you're an illegal immigrant, as the London Assembly passes a controversial motion in favour of free bus travel for people seeking asylum, and that includes illegal immigrants. Labour claim it's to help with essential journeys. Is this fair, or is it yet another blatant abuse of taxpayers' money? And that's all coming up in your next hour. The show, always a pleasure to have your company. Nigel Farage is presently speaking in Newport in Wales at the Reform Welsh Conference. We spoke with him exclusively around half an hour ago. He was firing on all cylinders, and a key question he raised, which we're talking about after the news, is this: should the United Kingdom do a bespoke trade deal with Trump's America, turbocharged Trumponomics, free capitalism, low taxation, powered by fossil fuels? Or, as Nigel Farage said, will he do what he's told by Brussels? What's your take on that? Get in touch. The usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But before we continue, here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Martin. A very good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines in the GB newsroom. Our top story: Dutch media is reporting that far-right leader Geert Wilders will meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. This follows an independent investigation launched by the Dutch authorities into an incident on the streets of Amsterdam, which saw Israeli football fans attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made, and the Dutch Prime Minister has condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting a Palestinian flag on fire. Israeli football fans say the police arrived too late to the scene.
They came really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hurted, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
The government will look to persuade Donald Trump that harming the UK by hiking tariffs is not in his interest. That's coming from the Foreign Secretary amid fears of a looming trade war. David Lammy said he would seek to get across to the United States that hurting your closest allies is not in Mr. Trump's interest. Trump's pledge to raise tariffs on imports into the US could hit the US economy. Mr. Trump said he wants to increase tariffs on imported goods from around the world by 10%, rising to 60% on items from China. This all comes as Mr. Lammy also says past critical comments he has made about the president-elect are old news. Now, Nigel Farage has said he's not convinced by the argument in favour of the assisted dying bill. Reform UK leader told GB News that he'd need a lot of convincing to support the bill that's due to be in Parliament at the end of the month. He said the way the assisted dying takes place in Canada gives him the shivers.
There are people that die in the most appalling circumstances. As an MEP, I was lobbied on that issue more than any other during my 20 years there. So I completely understand why people want this to be law, but I need a lot of convincing that it won't be abused.
Obviously, we'll be hearing from Nigel live from the Reform UK conference shortly. Now, it's been announced that the Princess of Wales is set to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said that Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace says the Queen's attendance at Remembrance will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia. Now let's go live now to the Reform UK's Welsh Party conference where leader Nigel Farage is currently speaking.
They are about to try and destroy the family farm. Just this morning I was walking the dogs and I met the local lady from the farm. She said, we're 6 generations. We have a 13-year-old son. What are we going to do? Can you imagine the impact in Wales on family farms that have been there for generations? So they're attacking anybody that has land. They're attacking anybody that has savings. They don't seem to think that success is a good thing. They talk about 4-day weeks, work from home, life-work balance. Oh, we're so much more productive at home, darling. It's all nonsense. This country, we are in economic decline. We are getting poorer with every single year that passes. Our national debt tripled under the Conservatives. Individually, the gross domestic product measure of our individual wealth has fallen for 6 of the last 8 quarters. We are in societal decline, where crimes like shoplifting are now almost ignored, where Class A drug use is completely out of control, and yet the instincts of a Labour government are to ban us having a cigarette in a pub garden. They have no understanding of the 5.5 million men and women that run their own businesses, that act as sole traders. This budget punishes anybody that does their own thing, punishes anybody that works in the private sector. But if you work in Whitehall, if you work for the government, if you work in the public sector, your job is secure and your pension with it. These are all recipes to make our country poorer. And we've got to be the party that stands up for innovation. We've got to be the party that stands up for men and women who've got the courage to go on their own, set up their own businesses. And we've got to be the party that tells young people if they want to succeed in life, they've actually got to buckle down, work hard, and we've got to be the party that says success is a good thing and not a bad thing. And it's been funny, you know, being a member of this Parliament after spending over 20 years in the other Parliament. At the moment, they're being politer to me in the Westminster Parliament than they were in the European Parliament. But hopefully that won't last. Although I will say one thing. I do think having Sir Lindsay Hoyle there as the Speaker, compared to that ghastly little pipsqueak Burko that went before, is an improvement. And indeed, he's already invited Donald Trump to come and speak to both houses of Parliament next year, which is a good thing. But our decline, economically and socially, can be put down, above all, to one thing: mass immigration into our country, scale that could never even have been imagined. Never been imagined. A population increase of 10 million in the last 20 years alone, and 85% of that down to immigration. Is it any wonder you can't get a GP appointment? Is it any wonder your kids and grandkids find it all but impossible to get on the housing ladder? Is it any wonder that in many of our towns and cities, the sense of community, the sense of belonging, the sense of togetherness is breaking down? And yet none of them even want to talk about it. And when the Conservatives, well, they're called Conservatives, when the Conservatives even dare touch on these issues, how can they from their own hypocritical position? Wales voted Brexit decisively. Decisively.
That's Nigel Farage there on stage. Newport, Wales, that's the Welsh Reform Assembly meeting on fine form there, talking about, he said here, a big line to react to back in the studio in Westminster with GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, the line that leapt out there is, Nigel Farage said, we are in societal decline. He talks about crimes like shoplifting being basically legalised, Class A drug consumption on the streets, and instead the Labour Party was focused on the Labour Party obviously in Wales, where they are the ruling party. So instead the Labour Party are going after people having a crafty fag in a pub garden, contempt for private enterprise, and the line, another one that leapt out, we have to get ourselves to a position where success is seen as a good thing and not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that him there talking about societal decline as a result specifically of immigration. Now, of course, that might be something that you would expect Nigel Farage to say, but I think it's given more wind to his sails, if you like, this Trump victory earlier this week. Lots and lots of people are arguing, and I think there's quite a lot of truth in this, that the reason why Donald Trump won down to two things. People don't like mass immigration. They've shown that over and over again at the polls. We've seen right-of-centre parties rising across the whole of Europe, happening in the US too, and people don't like rampant inflation. People are less worried about someone's politics, they're less worried about stories about them, they're less worried about even if they've gone through the courts like Donald Trump has. They just want more money in their pockets, and they think that Donald Trump will give them more money in their pockets. And I think Nigel Farage is very much hoping that his party, Reform, can become the sort of Trumpist heir here in the UK. And to do that, he is talking again about immigration. And I think that is something which strikes a real chord. You've got, you know, both the issue of the impact that mass immigration has on public finances. We've seen GDP per capita really nosedive in the past few years. Even though our GDP figures themselves don't look that bad, that sort of masks the fact that because of mass immigration, 700,000 people coming legally to the UK in 2023, of just a population of, you know, 65 million. That's a sizable chunk of the population coming over here every year. You know, that means that although GDP might be increasing, GDP per capita is going down. There is obviously an economic cost to mass immigration. But what Nigel Farage was talking about there was the societal cost of immigration too, talking about shoplifting, cultural differences. And I think that is something which increasingly is resonating with people in the UK, perhaps particularly in big cities like London, where those pro-Palestine protests have been, you know, taking over the city for days at a time, for the weekends, for months now. So I think it's really interesting, the tack that Nigel Farage is taking here, and I think it's something which is very much borrowed from the Trump playbook. It'll be a very good sign to Nigel Farage and his Reform Party that his good friend Donald Trump has won this election. It'll be really interesting to see if Keir Starmer brings in Nigel Farage to try and help that relationship with the UK and the US get back on a better footing. You could argue that Farage is better placed than anyone else in the UK Parliament to have a good relationship with Donald Trump, but I have a feeling that the Prime Minister probably won't want the Reform leader involved.
Well, I think you're probably right, Olivia Utley. Superb as ever. Thank you very much for your insight today. And joining me now to continue this conversation is the former Labour Special Advisor and the columnist, Paul Richards. Paul, welcome to the show. Let's admit, Paul, there has been a bit of a very non-special relationship between Donald Trump and the Labour Party top brass in the past few years. He's a fascist, a KKK sympathiser, a buffoon, a man not fit for public office. 100 Labour advisers sent to America to campaign for Donald Trump. Things aren't going swimmingly. Maybe the best person to go smooth that all over is Nigel Farage.
I mean, those quotes are not yours, I hope. You're going to put those into the context of the tweets that were sent out. It's a great clip for someone there to stick on social media. But anyway, I take the point that these spicy quotes by Labour spokespeople might have damaged the reputation of the Labour government with Trump and his advisers. But they've had a perfectly good meeting more recently. They've had a lunch, haven't they? And they've sat down and all gone along very swimmingly just before Trump was elected. And I have to say that the special relationship does rather transcend, one or two stupid tweets. Our interests as the great democracies and our interests, in terms of global geopolitics, absolutely transcend what may or may not have been said on Twitter. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried, I have to say, about the trade tariffs, because I think that if Trump's going to slap 10% tariff on trade with the UK, it's going to really damage our economy, and it really is going to be a break on the kind of growth that we need to get us out of the mess we're in. So I'd be more worried about that than Mr. Lammy's outbursts from 5 years ago.
Yeah, but we all know that the rhetoric about tariffs is a way of trying to get fear into an opponent. That's what Donald Trump does. And we've actually seen we've got a break in line just in this past half hour. The senator of New Jersey has said he believes that Donald Trump, the governor of New Jersey, beg your pardon, would be more sympathetic towards doing a trade deal with the United Kingdom because of Brexit. Trump looks more favourably upon the UK than he does the European Union. And that poses a huge question for Sir Keir Starmer. Trumponomics is low tax, low regulation, drill, baby, drill, with the potential for tariffs which could be avoided if you did a deal. Starmernomics thus far has been totally characterised by the opposite. High taxation, high regulation, an obsession with net zero. And here's the point. What about the love affair with Brussels? In Hungary this week with Ursula von der Leyen, Brussels could have the final say. Nigel Farage just said, would Sir Keir Starmer do what's right for Britain, or would he do what Brussels tells him to do?
Well, the fact is the British interests lie in being able to trade with a variety of partners all over the world. And if we are going to be this buccaneering trading nation, first of all, we have something to trade. So we need the manufacturing jobs in the UK creating things. And it could be green technologies that we lead on now, especially if America wants to take a back seat on that. And there's no contradiction between trading with our European neighbours and trading with our American partners, and with the Commonwealth and others as well. You have to trade with everyone. And the Labour Party believes in the value of that trade. It has to be done in a way that is balanced and gets the jobs, created in our country, and creates the wealth and the growth in our country. But we are traders.
Paul, the numbers are the numbers. Our biggest trading partner on the planet is the USA. £187 billion of exports to the USA last year alone. Germany, a distant second, on £63 billion. The future lies towards Washington. What I'm trying to say is, will the personal differences between the Labour Party, the very obvious ones, and Donald Trump, and also the different approach to economics and being more in tune with Brussels, allow the best deal for Britain to happen?
Well, I think we can trade with both. This is my point. We can be at the heart of a bridge, if you like.
Would Brussels allow that?
But we can certainly. Well, we're not in the EU anymore, so actually we can get on with some of these deals. That might be an advantage. I don't know. Do you honestly think Sir
Keir Starmer would do a deal that's best for Britain, that would deprioritise and the European Union, all their member states, and make it better for Britain? Von der Leyen would be straight on the bat phone saying you can't do that, it would damage Germany or France, etc.
Well, I can't foresee that. I can't see that scenario playing out at all, because why can't we trade with Europe and with the Americans, and that, you know, and like I say, the rest of the Commonwealth and so on. You know, if we are going to get the kind of growth that Stan was talking about, then we are going to have to be up our game in terms of trade, but also manufacturing. You know, we have to invest in some of the things that, like steel and the green technologies and, you know, wind farms and these things that
Labour's
create
just
apprenticeships and
closed Port
jobs. And
Talbot.
we've got to do all of that. Well, that's why we need to get the green steel up and running again. You know, we've got to get that investment in. And that's, I'm afraid, where we do need an industrial strategy, where you do need leadership from government, where you can't just leave it to the free market, because then we will be finished. We do need government investment and intervention to create some of those opportunities that we can then capitalise on our relationship with the US. But honestly, I don't believe for a second that it doesn't matter to Trump who is in government in the UK, because the geopolitics of this are, he has to deal with us. Because we're an important partner on the world stage, you know, regardless of who's in number 10.
But you just said an interesting point there, Paul. You said it needs state intervention with business. Donald Trump said he doesn't think so. It will be capitalism on steroids, fuelled by drilling, baby drilling. Paul Richards, we've got to leave it there. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on GB News. Thank you. Now, just 2 weeks left to grab a chance to win Christmas on us here at GB News in the greatest of great British giveaways, a festive bumper edition. Here's the details that you need for your chance to win Christmas on us. And the best of British with that. Now, coming up, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has said that Donald Trump will favour Britain over the European Union due to his sympathy for Brexit. And we'll discuss this next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We're talking about Gareth Southgate and his proposed Donald. There's a lot of rumours going around saying he's going to get a knighthood. So people like Nana are saying to me, why?
Because he hasn't won anything, has he? Look, I'm not a big fan of football. I watch England and the big matches, but he hasn't won anything. I mean, like, he hasn't actually won anything. He'll be following in the footsteps of people like Sir Alf Ramsey, Sir Bobby Robson, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
What has Gareth Southgate actually won?
Right, don't ask me. Let's ask our guests on this. So, has he truly earned the right to do this? Should all England managers, should you become an England manager and then get a knighthood as a result, or is that devaluing the honour? There you see on your screen to debate this, Harry Harris, top football writer, and royal commentator Angela Levin. She knows a thing or two about all of this. Angela, what do you think?
I think absolutely not. I mean, I know he's a good example to people, but he's a sort of almost. He's almost done this. He's almost won that. You can't have someone to have a knighthood if you're an almost. You can't. This is someone who does the most amazing things. This is a hero. This is a serviceman. It's not somebody who does really kindly and looks after his people, and it's just not fun. I think it just diminishes the whole thing of giving people such a high level of gratitude.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. With Donald Trump, the new US president, and Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, is a special relationship on death row. Well, concerns are growing over fears that Donald Trump could hike tariffs on the UK, creating a potential trade war. And Keir Starmer's government is therefore making efforts to smooth over tensions with the incoming president. However, they may not need to be overly concerned, as earlier today we learned that New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy has said that the president-elect Trump will favour Britain over the European Union because of his sympathy for Brexit. Well, that's food for thought. Let's discuss that now with the research professor at the US Army War College, Dr. Azim Ibrahim. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ibrahim. Always a pleasure. So the big question is this. Trumponomics looks like it's going to be a low tax, low regulation, drill, baby drill, turbocharged form of capitalism. Meanwhile, in the UK, we've got high tax, high regulation, an obsession with net zero, and we seem to still be tied to Brussels. Do you think a fantastic trade deal can still be done between the US and the UK? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, Martin, as you're probably aware, in the last administration, when Trump was last in office, there was actually trade negotiations going on between Boris Johnson and Donald Trump, and they were going relatively smoothly, and that was until Biden got elected and he broke the entire thing off. So will they pick up from there once again now that Trump is back in office? It's very difficult to say, but we have to understand that a lot of this discussion on tariffs, whether it's the 60% of tariffs on China or the 10% on the European Union, much of this is just Trump's negotiating style. He likes to start off from a position of strength and drive fear into his opponents. And his entire policy is based upon America first. One of the reasons he got elected is that people in the United States are simply tired, or the perception of the United States being taken advantage of by foreign countries, whether it's the defence of Europe, NATO spending, or it's unfair trade practices coming from Europe and China. So I expect Trump to be a very hard negotiator. I do not anticipate the special relationship will make too much difference if it means that he has to negotiate anything away from the United States that he's not willing to do so.
And yet, Dr. Ibrahim, Donald Trump does have an emotional connection with the UK. Of course, his mother was born in Scotland. He has golf courses here. And there's a certain Mr. Nigel Farage who could act as a conduit. And we've just heard there from the governor of New Jersey that Brexit is something he looks favourably upon. Certainly, we've paid our way when it comes to GDP with NATO. Of course, it's all about the art of the deal. But you'd certainly think, would you not, that the UK would be seen to be treated more favourably, perhaps, than Brussels?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we have a lot going in our favour. You know, as you said, his mother was from Scotland, and meeting the Queen, he actually said, was one of the great privileges of his life because his mother was a great fan of the Queen. So he has a very favourable spot of the UK, you know, in his worldview. And so there's certainly many positives that are going our way, and the fact that he also supported Brexit, and he was a fan of Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. But I think there's also negatives. We have to understand that, as you said, Trump is all about trade and economics and you know, building up the US economy, whereas the budget that we've had in the UK, you know, can be perceived to be anti-growth, high regulation. That's going to lead to less innovation, less businesses being developed. So there is a dichotomy there that we'll have to try to get over to kind of show that we are on the same page as President Trump when it comes to economic growth.
And Dr. Ibrahim, Nigel Farage spoke a short while ago to GB News, and he posed the question, will Sir Keir Starmer do what's best for Britain and do a deal with America, or would he do what Brussels tells him to?
Well, I think it's absolutely true. The United Kingdom has to do a deal with the US. That is definitely the priority. In fact, Martin, there was a study that was done in 2016 by the OECD. It was called Going for Growth. And it said the most significant trend over the next 50 years is going to be the economic decline of Europe. Over the next 40, 50 years, there's only going to be 3 economic centres in the world. It's going to be US, China and India. And the UK outside of Europe, you know, we have to try to figure out where we are going to align ourselves. And not just economically, but geopolitically, the US is much more closer to our interests and our future than the European Union. The European Union is going to go through perceptual decline, continuously. So if there is a question of priority, it has to be the United States. But obviously, as a nation, we need to look after our own interests, and that means trying to do what is best for us. Even if, in that vein, we'd hope that we try to do deals with both Europe and the US.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you very, very, very much for joining us on today on GB News. And that's the research professor at the US Army War College, Dr. Azim Ibrahim. Thank you very much. Now, still lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, including we'll be discussing Donald Trump, who is mulling a peace plan for ending the war in Ukraine, but it could mean British troops on the border. We'll discuss this next with the Ukrainian MP. Fascinating stuff. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Sophia Hill.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5:30. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines in the GB newsroom. Dutch media is reporting that Dutch politician Geert Wilders will meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. This follows an independent investigation launched by Dutch authorities into an incident where Israeli football fans were attacked when leaving their Europa League match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv. The public prosecutor says 62 arrests have been made, and the Dutch Prime Minister has condemned the anti-Semitic attacks. Before the match, there was trouble between Maccabi fans and pro-Palestinian protesters, with Maccabi supporters reportedly attacking a taxi and setting fire to a Palestinian flag.
They came really late. They came too late. They came when a lot of people were already hurted, injured. Some of them probably go to the hospital. I don't know if they 100 show information.
Sir Keir Starmer has pledged £3.5 million in support for veterans facing homelessness. The funding will go to the Reducing Veteran Homelessness programme, which provides wraparound specialist support for employment and independent living for veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Announcing the funding, Sir Keir said veterans represent the very best of our country and we must honour their sacrifices. Some sporting news now, and Tottenham Hotspur have been charged with misconduct by the Football Association in relation to homophobic chants by their supporters during a match against Manchester United earlier this season. They were understood to be aimed at Arsenal's head coach, Mikel Arteta, and United's midfielder, Mason Mount. The club now face sanctions from the national governing body over the matter and have been given until November 13th to respond to the charges. And it's been announced that the Princess of Wales is going to attend 2 Remembrance Day events this weekend. Buckingham Palace said Kate would attend both the Remembrance Sunday service at the Cenotaph and the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall tomorrow. But the Palace say the Queen's attendance at the Remembrance events will be subject to medical advice nearer the time. Queen Camilla is unwell with a chest infection and was forced to pull out of engagements earlier this week. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, of course, next is Jubes & Co. And standing in for Michelle Juby tonight is Miriam Case. Miriam, welcome to the show, and what's on your menu?
Well, good evening, Martin. We've got an action-packed show. We're going to be discussing these shocking attacks in Amsterdam that many viewers will have seen on social media. Also, on the topic of social media, we'll be looking at the Australian government's decision to ban social media for under-16s and whether or not their plans will work. So lots to discuss with my panel. Make sure you stay tuned.
Yeah, they're losing the plot down under. Superb stuff. 6 till 7. That's Miriam Cates on Jubes & Co. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, a bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south again. A bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. A bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well if it is damp and drizzly. Temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. To the west of Edinburgh on the M8, the westbound exit is closed to junction 2 where it meets the M9 after a bin lorry caught fire and shed a load. In Greater Manchester, the M61 is down to 1 lane southbound from junction 6 at Horwich to 5 at West Horton following an accident causing long queues on the approach. Moving into Lincolnshire at Boston, the Horncastle Road closed off the A16 for emergency repair works after a water main burst. In Northamptonshire, the A14 is closed westbound at junction 10, the A6 Burton Latimer turn-off for accident investigation work. In Herefordshire, south of Leominster, the A49 closed at Marlborough following an accident. And on the trains, well, Transport for Wales reporting delays of 20 minutes northbound from Wilmslow to Manchester Piccadilly because of those problems with the signals. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, as we all look ahead to Armistice Day, Royal Historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop has spoken to the 101-year-old World War II veteran Betty Webb. It's magnificent. Take a look.
I've come to Withell in the West Midlands to find one of the Bletchley girls I wrote about 10 years ago. A decade on, and Betty Webb, aged 101, is still flourishing. And her story is amazing. From going to Hitler's Germany before the war, to being selected for work in the mansion in Bletchley Park, till finally, in 1945, she went to the Pentagon in America. Before most people, you have an inside track of what's going on in Germany, don't you? Because as a pen friend, a teenage girl, you go over on an exchange to Germany in 1937.
That's right. I was in Germany for about 3 months, living with a German family, and there were two daughters, and I went to school with them. The only thing that was a little bit disturbing was the fact that, quite obviously, a lot of the local middle-aged people were very concerned about Hitler.
And extraordinary to think that within a matter of years, you're going to be at war, your country at war with their country, these former friends of yours.
Well, it was a situation I had no control over, but it was quite, sad in a way, I suppose, because I never communicated with them again.
Before conscription's introduced for women in Britain, you've signed up, you've joined the ATS, this female army, and from there, you are selected for Bletchley Park. How did that happen?
After basic training, we were asked what we would like to do. I just put in my notes that I spoke German, and I think that was what prompted the powers that be to send me to an interview in London. And at the end of the day, the major in the intelligence corps, I think he was, he said, "Here you are, get yourself to Bletchley." Gave me a rail wand.
At the end of your Bletchley experience, there's a whole new adventure for Betty Webb, isn't there?
Because absolutely, yes.
You're selected to go to America.
That's right, yes. I was privileged to be sent to Washington, D.C., and work in the Pentagon. Somebody discovered I was rather good at paraphrasing, which was important because had the enemy picked up any of our messages, they would perhaps have realised that we had, in fact, picked them up, and we had hoped that my paraphrasing would disguise that.
I think you were the first female ATS woman, in other words, first British female army member who worked in the Pentagon.
I believe so, yes. There were other British people there, but no women. I was the only woman.
Extraordinary. You've had the most remarkable life, Betty. You've been awarded a Légion d'honneur, and you've been given an MBE, and you're 101, if we're allowed to say that, and you went to the coronation. Have I missed anything out?
Well, looking back over my life, I think I've been extremely privileged.
I don't believe it's only fortunate. I also happen to think you make your own luck. And I've got to say, you've also been the most remarkable friend.
Thank you.
Isn't that magnificent? Betty Webb, the very, very best of British. 101 years young and still an absolute legend. And, of course, it's this weekend, Remembrance Sunday. Now, yesterday, of course, we covered the contentious topic that there might be some pro-Palestine protests on the same day. Let's hope that does not happen. I'll be down at the Cenotaph this weekend. If you're there, please come and say hello. Now, the Prince of Wales faced noisy protests when he visited Cape Town Harbour yesterday to learn about sustainable fishing. And GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker has this report on the Prince's visit.
Get out of here! Tell your father to make right what he did here in this country!
Tensions running high as Prince William visited a harbour in Cape Town. A number of local fishermen clashed with police, angry they were being ignored. Others heckling the prince, upset his grandmother and their ancestors once ruled over South Africa.
We are the Aboriginal people, meaning we are the original people of this continent. We were first here, but we are so marginalised.
This in turn led to tense clashes with the vast majority of South Africans who turned out to welcome William.
Where's the police? Why don't the police come and shut this man up?
Prince William left via a back exit, but was unfazed by the distant shouts and had spent time warmly greeting the crowds of well-wishers.
Absolutely fantastic. And of course I'm a royalist. We love them. We love all the royals. We love the Queen. We love Princess Di. We love the boys. We've known and loved them since they were born. So we're thrilled that William is here. We're delighted.
The Prince of Wales was visiting Aberlobi, a 2023 Earthshot Prize finalist, which aims to protect fishing communities and arm customers with better information about where their seafood comes from. New funding's been announced to help small-scale fishers reach more customers with green-listed species. And you guessed it, fish was on the menu for lunch, a traditional braai he enjoyed with famous faces from last night's Earthshot Prize ceremony. The Prince has revealed he woke feeling emotional and excited after his Earthshot Prize awards. Organisers may be packing down, but the environmental solutions are scaling up. Cameron Walker, GB News, Cape Town.
There we go, a right royal backlash in Cape Town. Now, coming up, the world is your oyster if you're a London-based asylum seeker, as the London Assembly passes a controversial motion to allow free travel for migrants, and that includes even illegal immigrants. Is this fair or a complete and utter waste of taxpayers' money? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
This is about pulchronomics, which is the often hidden, often controversial economics of beauty. And there's this guy, he's called, here it says Anil Hamamesh, but I think they've missed out the D, so I'm guessing he's Daniel rather than Anil, which he might be, though. He might be, or he might be anal for an Anil Hamamesh, maybe. That's his unfortunate name. But basically, he's looked into how ugliness affects people, and it turns out he's discovered that ugly people are less attractive. And that affects them for the rest of their life. Now, where this does get interesting, it is worrying because, of course, this is going to lead to the ugly rights movement, ugly pride march down some dirty back street. And but I remember hearing about this at the time. People born in the UK between March 3rd and March 9th, 1958, were part of this massive survey that was done, which was finding about what would happen to them later in life, and it went through a number of different factors. But I didn't know this. The teachers were also asked to rate their pupils on attractiveness.
Yeah, it's a bit pedo-y.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that would wash now, but it was bone structure and where they're symmetrical, that kind of thing.
You should probably really have a committee of at least half a dozen teachers. Take a sort of standardised view across the... You might get a different point of view from the biology teacher, from the Latin master.
You suggest this to a school, and then we can see if we get it going.
It's interesting, though. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but generally speaking, it is understood within sort of psychological, psychometrics and so on, that IQ is the thing that most closely maps your outcomes, generally speaking. But the idea of beauty is the one that isn't discussed. And there is genuinely a theory that this is actually the great determinant of your life chances.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. Oh, no, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:48. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, how would you like to get free transport in the capital, London? Well, there's great news if you're an illegal immigrant, because it has been sensationally exposed that Sadiq Khan is being urged by Labour politicians in the London Assembly to give free transport to all asylum seekers in London. And yes, that does include illegal immigrants. Yesterday, the London Assembly passed that hugely controversial motion in favour of bus passes for people seeking asylum, which the party claim is to help with essential journeys to help their well-being. Now, is this fair, or is it yet another blatant abuse of taxpayers' money? Well, I can now speak with the Executive Director of Migration Watch, Mike Jones, who joins me now on the show. Mike, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Well, quite simply, the world's your oyster. If you're an asylum seeker, you get a free Oyster card. Now, that's something that precious few other Londoners get. Is this a fair use of taxpayers' money? Because it's not a free bus pass, it's paid for by taxpayers. Or is it a blatant waste of money?
It's quite remarkable, isn't it, Martin? You know, Labour have been busy slashing the winter fuel allowance and raising the price cap on bus fares from £2 to £3. But here they are now in the London Assembly urging Sadiq Khan to subsidise the transport costs of illegal immigrants, people who have destroyed their documents, abused Britain's hospitality, entered into deals with criminal gangs while failing to claim asylum in other safe countries. You know, it's a topsy-turvy political system where the values of the political class are completely at odds with the values of the British public.
And Mike Jones, they say this is to help with essential journeys. I wonder what that means. I've got a little picture I'd like to put up on the screen now for you, Mike. You'll be well familiar with this. Every asylum seeker in an asylum seeker hotel in Britain gets a free bike. That's my local asylum seeker hotel. It's in Peckham. It used to be a Fools and Horses themed hotel. Now only fools and asylum seekers try and book a room there. It's festooned with free bikes outside. They get them for free. They can use their bikes. They can get on their bikes to go to the hospital, get on their bikes to do whatever they need to do. That's supplied for free. Why on earth, if this is how they can get around London, we're all being urged to cycle. We're all being urged to go green. They've got free bikes. Why do they deserve a free Oyster pass on top?
Well, not only do they get free bikes, there's also a travel allowance for attending mandatory meetings that are arranged by the Home Office. So, you know, with these compulsory meetings, migrants already have free travel. But this motion in the London Assembly wants to take it a step further and, you know, just give them complete travel around London and elsewhere. As you say, it's a gross waste of taxpayers' money, and the priorities of the political class are not in line with the priorities of the British people.
And Mike Jones, it makes you wonder, you know, what they need to be doing getting around London. I mean, they're not allowed to work because they're asylum seekers, although there are a suspicious amount of Deliveroo bikes outside many of these hotels. We've done our own stings here at GB News, showing oftentimes that they filter into the black economy. We know also that asylum seekers are getting free passes into London into London tourism hotspots. Isn't it wonderful? Everything seems to be rolled out on a red carpet if you come to Britain illegally.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to realise that the values of the political class are more in line with those of the global elite. The national interest doesn't really factor into their thinking. And obviously, it's the hard-pressed taxpayer who gets shafted. And what really sticks to the craw here is that the Conservative Party in the London Assembly, allegedly a centre-right party, didn't vote against the motion. They abstained. You know, ask yourself, why didn't they vote against it? It was just one Reform AM who took a stand. You know, clearly the Tories' mates in Islington and Hackney are more important than for them sticking up for Conservative voters.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on that. It's the Executive Director of Migration Watch, Mike Jones. Thank you very much. A couple of your says to finish the show. The final word goes to you. Sharon says, Betty Webb, what an absolute darling. She was the 101-year-old veteran, of course, we featured in the show. And the final word of this week goes to Daz. He says this: I hope and pray that we don't see any pro-Palestine protests this weekend on Remembrance Sunday. Why on earth can these people please not realise they need to take the day off? Take the day off and allow us to remember the fallen peacefully. This is about British war dead. This is not about Palestine today. Please, can you leave us to remember our war dead in peace? Daz, I totally echo that. Have a peaceful weekend to all of you. Have a great remembrance. I'll be at the Cenotaph. Thank you very much. Now, I'll be back Monday, 3 till 6. But next is Jubes & Co. tonight with Miriam Cates. Have a fantastic weekend.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Thanks for being there for the latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, it's more of the same out there today. Dry but cloudy sums it up. But northern Scotland again seeing some good spells of sunshine. High pressure is dominating but sitting to the east. Weather fronts are trying to move in and they will make some progress during the weekend. But for the time being, just a lot of cloud. Some holes in the cloud across northern Scotland have allowed the sun to shine today, but they're going to allow it to turn quite cold tonight. Maybe some fog patches here as well. Elsewhere, a bit of drizzle coming into parts of the east coast of England, eastern Scotland, and some spots across the south again. A bit damp across Devon and Cornwall. Temperatures holding up, 6 to 7 degrees Celsius, 9 or 10 in the west, but we will see some frost across northern Scotland where the skies stay clear. Some sunshine here again on Saturday. Again, elsewhere, fairly gloomy. We may see a bit more in the way of light rain and drizzle on the east coast as well, so a bit dreich here, but some sunshine again in northwest Scotland once the fog has cleared. We'll see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland again, and maybe some drizzle at times here across the east in particular, so perhaps a little damp in Belfast. Some drizzly conditions for northeast England and at times along the south coast, but a good chunk of England and Wales just dry and cloudy again. Northern parts of Wales, northwest England may poke out with a bit of sunshine. Hang on to sunny skies across the Highlands. Elsewhere, not a great deal of change. Bit damp, a bit drizzly on some of these North Sea coasts, and feeling quite cool here as well. If it is damp and drizzly, temperatures really struggling actually, lower than recent days, just 8 or 9 Celsius. For the west, we should again creep into the teens, particularly where we see some sunshine in the far northwest. But in the far northwest, more in the way of cloud and rain for Sunday morning. Outbreaks of rain moving in, that's a weather front. It will turn brighter come the afternoon, but again, a lot of cloud for England and Wales. A bit more in the way of rain, particularly in the west, but eastern areas, at least on Sunday, should be a little brighter, and for most of us, a little milder as well. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays in Greater Manchester continue on the M61. 2 lanes remain closed southbound from junctions 6 to 5, but in Horwich and West Horton, the scene of an accident. In Lincolnshire, the Horncastle Road remains shut. At Boston, off the A16, off the Bargate roundabout, they're repairing a water main that's burst. And the Hertfordshire stretch of the M25 is blocked anti-clockwise just before junction 25 at the A10, at the scene of an accident causing queues back into Essex to 26 at Waltham Abbey. And 1 lane remains shut anti-clockwise just after 19 at Watford, where a car's broken down. In Herefordshire, south of Leominster, the A49 is closed at Marlborough following an accident. And on the trains, northern services remain suspended, but in Hull and York, it's all down to electrical supply problems and a points failure over at Selby. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving